Hi there. Welcome to our module on Google Analytics 4, or GA4 as it's also known. I'm Jill Quick, an analytics and training consultant who helps brands get the most out of measurement. I've teamed up with Wix Studio to help you sharpen your Google Analytics 4 skills because, let's face it, GA4 can be overwhelming. The good news, Wix Studio has your back. We're providing a GA4 starter module that will help you understand how GA4 works and how to get the best from it. Before we get started, let's talk about what you'll need to make this module work for you. First, you should already be familiar with basic website analytics tools, those that help you measure your marketing efforts and website performance. Next, it's important that you have access to a GA4 account. This can be your own account or a Google demo account. Having hands-on access will be really helpful to put your learning into practice and enhance your skills. To fully benefit from this module, I encourage you to engage with all the content we've provided for you. This includes not only the lessons and tutorials, but also the supporting articles. These resources are designed to complement each other, offering well-rounded and in-depth guidance on GA4. Finally, don't be alarmed if things look different. GA4 is constantly changing, so much so that there might be some updates to GA4 from the time we filmed this course to the time you're watching it. What matters is that you can report on how SEO impacts traffic to a website, to understand what users do on the site, the content they read, and the assets they interact with. Importantly, you want to show your organization or client the ROI of your SEO activity and how you're making an impact. Sounds good? Super. Let's quickly go through what you'll learn in this module. We'll start off by explaining how GA4 works. It'll help you understand the new data model and how it differs from other versions of Google Analytics you might have worked with in the past. We'll look at the types of events you can have in GA4 and what they track. The good news is that there are integrations with Wix Studio products that can do some of the heavy lifting for you. More on that later. Like a lot of SEO tools, GA4 comes with jargon. We'll break down the latest terms and cover the key concepts so you can speak with confidence when presenting your data. Once you've nailed that, we'll consider how to approach your measurement journey. That's being able to map out the events you need for a website and understanding how the GA4 admin configuration settings impact your data. Lastly, we'll look at the user interface, specifically standard and explore reports. And by the end of that lesson, you'll know exactly where to find the right data that shows all your wonderful work. Again, Google Analytics 4 is a dense topic, but with this module, we'll give you more than enough to get started. And remember, Wix Studio is always adding tons of resources, which will signpost you to along the way. Okay, if you're ready, let's get started. You might be wondering where GA4 got its name and what makes it different. Well, to answer that question, we need to take a look back at what came before it. In this lesson, we'll explore how GA4 evolved to what it is today and how it differs from previous analytics tools. Let's jump in. There are 3 versions of analytics that paved the way for GA4. They are Urchin, Classic, and Universal Analytics. Let's take a look at each one. In the beginning, Google bought a product called Urchin, which it rebranded as Google Analytics. When it was initially launched in 2005, Google gave it away for free. Before this version, we were using basic hit counters to understand website visitors, Being able to access a free tool that helped us figure out how users found a site and what they did when they got there was revolutionary. Then in around 2007, we moved to classic analytics. With this, Google upgraded the user interface and gave us much better reports and data visualization. The popularity of the tool continued to grow. Fast forward to 2011, 2012, when Google Analytics announced its third version, Universal Analytics. This gave us another user interface and features such as enhanced e-commerce, custom dimensions and metrics, and custom reports. Then there were no real developments for well over a decade until October 2020, when Google announced its fourth version of Analytics. Although the previous three versions were different from each other, they were familiar. This wasn't the case with GA4, and when I first logged in, I thought, what's going on? Where is everything? With that dramatic change in mind, let's look at what makes GA4 different. The big difference between GA4 and the analytics tools we covered is that GA4 is not another universal analytics upgrade. It's an entirely different analytics data model. The previous three versions used a hit-based data model, which ran on the basis of a user, someone who has visited a website, and their sessions, how many visits a user makes to a site within a given timeline. So if you have a user who visits a website 3 times a week, this is counted as one user with 3 sessions. When a user interacted with the website, it triggered a hit. For example, when a page view was loaded, a video played, a PDF downloaded, that sort of thing. Our data model in GA4 is a user and event model. That means all interactions from a website's users will trigger an event. So our page view that used to be a hit is now an event. I know this takes some getting used to, as we have had almost 20 years using a hit-based model, but don't worry, you'll get it. Now that you understand how GA4 evolved to what it is today, we can look at one of its key highlights, user consent. See you in the next lesson to learn more. One of GA4's key highlights is its emphasis on privacy. Through the integration of machine learning and statistical modelling, it's been built to function effectively both with and without cookies. These technologies enable GA4 to bridge data gaps, an important capability at a time when reliance on cookies is on the decline. Let's take a look at what you need to know when it comes to tracking site visitors and consent rules for GA4. When collecting a website's data, you need to get explicit consent from a user for any cookies and identifiers operating on that site. The website should have a cookie banner, which is updated to make sure consent rules run correctly for GA4. Consent regulations will differ depending on the region, but Wix Studio enables a consent policy that allows all parties to adhere to the applicable laws. In general, brands can use consent mode in addition to their chosen consent management platform and cookie banner delivery. You can opt for consent mode using Google Tag Manager, another Google product that allows you to manage and deploy marketing tags like code snippets or tracking pixels. You'll need this when we come to creating events later in the module. For those not overly familiar with Google Tag Manager, don't worry, we'll provide links to some excellent resources along the way. Now back to GA4 and consent. Implementing consent guarantees that your traffic is accepted by GA4 and complies with the necessary regulations. Google has introduced an updated consent mode called Consent Mode version 2 to meet the regulatory requirements set out in the EU's Digital Markets Act. As a gatekeeper, Google is now mandated to keep a record of user consent states internally. And this represents another shift, preventing Google from passing this responsibility to companies using GA4 or relying on those companies to ensure valid consent from their website visitors. So what does this mean for you? You should review your consent management platform and make sure it does what it says it does. Also, to ensure you comply with the relevant regulations, it's recommended you set up Consent Mode version 2, which is mandatory for those using other Google tools such as Google Ads. For Wix Studio sites, this is automatically done for you. Again, we have some more resources on this topic that we'll link you to. So that concludes our lesson on consent. The general message you can take from it is, in an ever-changing regulatory landscape, we must be able to adapt our tracking techniques to ensure we follow privacy rules. In an upcoming lesson, we'll cover how to implement consent policy on Wix Studio. But now, with your consent, let's move on to the next lesson, where we'll look at some of GA4's key metrics and how they differ from Universal Analytics. While you'll have become accustomed to relying on session data for reporting with other analytics tools, GA4 does things a little differently. You might notice these differences in session counts when you compare historical data from Universal Analytics with GA4. In this lesson, we'll dive deeper into these differences, quickly recap what a session is, and explore some of the key metrics used in GA4. Let's get started. Each time a user visits a website, a session is recorded. This session contains all the interactions that a user has with the website. This begins with the first event a user triggers and continues until they finish doing what they wanted to do on the site, or there's a period of inactivity. All versions of analytics have a 30-minute default timeout for a session. That means if I start a session on a site, but am inactive and leave the tab open on my laptop, not triggering anything else, GA4 will close my session after 30 minutes. So with this in mind, why do the session counts between GA4 and Universal Analytics not marry up? Well, this is because GA4 does not create a new session when the campaign source changes mid-session, whereas Universal Analytics does. Let's use an example to unpack that. A user starts their digital journey by clicking on a link from a search result. They engage with a pop-up that says if they sign up for a newsletter, they'll get a discount. They then open that email and get the discount code. But before they make their purchase, they visit a review site to see if they can trust the brand. They finally convert, having typed the product name and clicked on the advert. So altogether, within that journey, we have organic, email, referral, and paid search. As GA4 does not create a new session when the campaign source changes mid-session, this is counted as one session. That's if the activity happened within the session default timeout, which is 30 minutes. But in Universal Analytics, that journey would have been classed as 4 sessions. This is important to flag because you'll be comparing data from UA with GA4. And because GA4 treats sessions differently, you're likely to have a lower session count in GA4 than in UA. I'll put a pin in this for now, but we'll take a deeper dive into attribution across a user journey in a later lesson. You might have noticed that some of your reports don't have a bounce rate metric by default. That's because it's been replaced by engaged sessions. An engaged session in GA4 is a session that goes beyond mere interaction. They're calculated for sessions that last longer than the default 10 seconds, had a conversion event, or triggered more than one page view. When you do see a bounce rate, it's an inversion of the engaged session metric. So even though it has the same name as Universal Analytics, it's not calculated the same way. This is why the numbers in some of your reports that have engagement as a metric will look different. Next up is another insightful metric in GA4, user engagement duration per session. It's a bit of a mouthful, but this metric provides valuable insight into how much time a web page keeps a user's attention. Not only does it help you gauge the effectiveness of content, but it also sheds light on which pages or elements resonate most with an audience and gives you a strong foundation for optimizing user experiences. Then we have active user, which is found in the Explore reports. We'll cover the active user metric in a later lesson, but it's usually one of the default metrics when you start to build reports in GA4. An active user is considered active when they've triggered an engaged session or specific event, such as the first visit event or engagement time millisecond event. That's it from this lesson on key metrics in GA4. Join me in the next lesson where we'll look at event categorization. In GA4, everything is an event. For example, someone visiting a page, something you may recognize as a page view in UA, is an event. Someone starting their first session, something you might consider a unique session, is an event. So for this lesson, we'll focus on all things events, looking at the 4 key categories in GA4 and how they're structured. We'll also touch on GA4's 2 main reporting areas and highlight the differences in data visibility when it comes to looking at event parameters. Ready to get started? Okay, let's dive in. Events in GA4 are structured differently from those in Universal Analytics. In UA, you had a category, action, and label. The category was the big, broad bucket, like, for example, video. The action described the doing, like playing the video. Then the label provided context, such as the name of the video played. As GA4 has a different data model to UA, its structure of events is also different. We no longer have the hierarchy of category, action, and label. Instead, we have event name and event parameters. Let's take a creative approach to understanding events in GA4 by thinking of them as event DNA. Imagine an intricate helix string is the event DNA. This helix represents the core of your GA4 experience, where each loop contains vital information. At the heart of our event DNA lies the event name. It's like the master gene defining the type of action we're tracking. Whether it's a click, a page view, or a generate lead, the event name sets the tone. Now let's zoom in on each loop of the helix. Here you'll find event parameters neatly nested under the event name. These parameters hold critical details like the button clicked or the product viewed. They add depth and context to the action. Google recommends that you structure your events to use snake case, meaning they're written in lowercase with an underscore replacing the space. Think of this as the event DNA format. Wix Studio has a full suite of events according to Google's recommendations. Using Wix code, you can add extra events that answer your business objectives. In GA4, there are 4 key categories of events, each with a specific purpose. There are too many to go through, so we'll share a template that lists all the events and parameters. But for now, let's look at the 4 key categories. Starting with automatic events. These automatically fire when you activate your GA4 configuration tag or turn on GA4. Automatic events are not assigned a parameter with the exception of user engagement, but the events still have a value assigned to the event name. So don't panic when you can't find a parameter for these events. Automatic events will cover things like language, where the value might be English or French. Your page title value will be your excellent title tags. The first visit and session start event values will be an event count. They're used to calculate your users and sessions. Next up is enhanced events. These come from your data stream and capture specific interactions without extra configuration. You'll need to check which enhanced events have been turned on within your data stream configuration settings, and we'll go into more detail on this in a later lesson. One enhanced event example is the page view event. This helps you understand what pages people are visiting. If you rely on the scroll metric, you should know that this will only show data for pages where a depth of 90% has been reached. Meanwhile, the click event, used to understand outbound clicks from a site, will track phone numbers, clicked on mobile devices, and mail to email links on website pages, along with any other outbound clicks such as social media channels. If the website has any content that can be downloaded, the file download event will track those actions for you. Aside from what you get out of the box with automatic and enhanced events, there are recommended events. Recommended events are predefined event names and parameters provided by Google Analytics to use in your GA4 data stream. They're intended to support common measurement objectives for websites. Do you need to follow them? Well, the short answer is yes, because there are a number of reports that will only populate with data if they're using the recommended event names. A note here on recommended events. Although GA has provided parameter names, there are examples where additional parameters need to be sent alongside the event name. For example, generate lead is a recommended event name that Google provides to track form submissions on a website. Google has also provided two suggested parameters to use with the generate lead event. They are value and currency, but you don't have to use, and to be honest, not many people do use them because they need more information to make that generate lead event valuable. Now, Wix Studio sends a special parameter with generate lead that allows us to identify which exact form generated a lead. The majority of recommended events are sent by Wix Studio. Additional tracking events can be defined through Google Tag Manager or by using Wix code. The last event category is custom events, which is anything that doesn't fit into the previous three categories. That, for example, could be an event Wix Studio sends upon selecting a booking date in Wix Bookings. This event is not on Google's recommended events lists, but some businesses may want to track it. One final topic I want to cover in this lesson, which can get technical, is the parameter or custom parameter data in your reports. There's a section in your GA4 admin configuration that we'll cover in a later lesson, which shows you how the custom definition settings work. But right now, I just want to cover the theory. There are two reporting areas in the GA4 user interface. The first one is standard. This is where you find your lifecycle data to answer questions like, how do people find my website? What do they do when they get there? And do they convert? The data in standard reports is aggregated. This means it's summarized and doesn't contain user level details. It's not impacted by your data retention settings, so you'll see the data for as long as you track it. Then we have Explore. This is where you can build custom and detailed reports that include features to build funnels. The important thing to understand here is that when you want to see the parameters of your events, you can only view them in the standard real-time reports, which is for the last 30 minutes of a website's activity. If you want to dig deeper and see parameters in other standard reports, you won't get any. The exploration reports allow you to see any parameters that are listed in the auto, enhanced, or recommended events as they're available by default. However, your Explore reports are limited to a look-back window in line with your data retention settings. The free GA4 version has a data retention setting of 2 or 14 months. And if you have any custom parameters like the form ID for someone who triggered the generate lead event, they won't show up in standard or Explore. Why? Well, Google isn't psychic. To see your custom parameters, you need to register them as a custom definition. And to see any parameters in your standard reports, you guessed it, you need to register them as a custom definition. I know some of the language used relating to parameter data and how Google names specific features can be unclear. For those of you using Wix Studio integrations and want to see the data for the custom parameter that shows the form type of a generate lead event, you need to publish that parameter as a custom event. If you want to view data in your standard report, such as adding a secondary dimension or looking at trends data beyond the 14 months that Explore gives you, you need to register those parameters to see those values. I know the information provided in this lesson is a lot to take in. Don't worry if you have to replay sections of the video. Some of the concepts take a while to process. Also, to help refresh your memory, we've created a quiz for you, and the Wix Studio team offers heaps of resources for you to continue learning. Join me in the next lesson where we'll take a look at the admin configuration settings that impact how your data is processed, including how to register your parameters so you can see your report's data. I hope to see you there. Welcome to Lesson 5, where we'll explore admin configuration settings. These are really important because without them, a GA4 data stream runs in its default settings, and that can lead to incorrect data. A good rule of thumb is to always assume your account settings are incorrect from the get-go. Also, setting up GA4 correctly won't happen overnight. You need time to get it right. How long will it take? Well, how long is a piece of string? As with most things, it depends on your or your client's needs. The following lessons on data collection and configuration will have suggestions that may not suit your current projects. You might need to explore the topic in more depth or speak with experts. But don't worry, we'll direct you to Wix Studio articles and other resources that dive deeper. For now, we'll highlight the settings you need to know. These are settings that can impact the event data you see in your reports, affect the metrics we discussed earlier, and steal your SEO of credit for conversions. Before we jump into property settings and user management, a quick and gentle reminder of a few things. Firstly, as we've mentioned before, Google Analytics is evolving at a rapid pace. From the time we recorded this to the time you're watching, some of the interface may have changed. Thankfully, for the most part, Google Analytics has kept the name of specific sections the same. Secondly, you'll need to have the right admin settings to carry out some of these actions. If you can't see what I'm sharing on the screen, then request to have your access level raised. Lastly, rules around data collection and consent vary from country to country. If you're ever in doubt about any setting, seek advice from your data protection officer, legal counsel, or data privacy consultant. In a previous lesson, we covered the 4 main categories of events. Auto events, which come from your configuration tag, enhanced events, which come from your data stream, recommended events, the ones Google provides a list for, and custom events, any that don't fit into the previous 3 categories. Right now, we're going to look specifically at enhanced events. Firstly, you'll need to be in the admin section of GA4 And we can get there by clicking on the blue cog in the bottom left corner. As we want to look at the enhanced events in our data stream, we need to navigate to the data collection and modification section and select data streams. You can then go ahead and select the data stream for the website. Once you've done that, go ahead and click on the cog next to enhanced measurement. This will open up a box that shows all the enhanced events that are currently toggled on or off for the website. We covered these events in lesson 4, so go back and have a look if you need to. What I want to highlight here is the page view event. This is in grey and turned on by default. However, there are some advanced settings that we need to cover for those of you working with a Wix Studio site. If you click on Advanced Settings, it will show you some checkbox options. Unselect Page Changes based on browser history events and hit Save in the top right corner to allow GA4 to track the page view every time the URL changes. This prevents duplicity of your data. I'd suggest you consider the customization of your event tracking in GA4, particularly when it comes to form interactions. While the form interaction enhanced event is a handy feature, in some cases it can capture a broader range of interactions than intended. This can lead to a less precise understanding of form submissions. To get a clearer picture, I recommend using the Generate Lead event instead. This event not only provides more accurate data for form submissions, but also offers insights into the type of form submitted, which can be incredibly useful for your analysis. If you're using a Wix Studio integration, you'll benefit from the event data provided and not rely on the enhanced event for data on your forms. Okay, now I want you to go back to the web stream details and select the Configure Tag Settings. Click on Configure Your Domains. If you do qualify for cross-domain tracking, where the same measurement ID has been added to your domain, then you need to do this task and add your domains in this setting. This list enables cross-domain measurement and further defines which links on a site do not trigger outbound click events when using enhanced measurement. Now that you have a good understanding of enhanced events and how to configure domains for accurate tracking, we'll move on. Next, we'll explore settings related to referral exclusion and session and engagement timeouts. See you in the next lesson. Welcome back. We're still on the subject of GA4 data stream settings, now looking at referral exclusion, session timeouts, and engagement timeouts. Okay, let's go back to our configuration tag settings and walk you through them. This is where we left off in our previous lesson, looking at configuring domains for cross-domain tracking. Now, I want you to click on Show More as we need to talk about referral exclusions. You're now presented with a longer list of options. Click on the setting called List Unwanted Referrals. In GA4, referral exclusions play a key role in making sure our marketing channels get the credit they deserve for any conversions or revenue. Referrals are essentially links from other websites, social media platforms, or any external domain that directs traffic to a site. However, we sometimes need to exclude certain domains from being counted as referral traffic in your acquisition reports. This setting allows you to list the domains you don't want included. Let's consider a common scenario that shows just how important this setting is. Imagine you have an e-commerce shop and you use a third-party payment processor like Klarna, PayPal, or Stripe. After payment for your goods is processed, visitors are often redirected back to the site with a confirmation or thank you page. Without a referral exclusion list in place that includes all your payment processors, these redirects can sometimes be mistakenly tracked as sources of traffic and defined as referral traffic. In the same way our referral exclusion list in UA properties can list domains we don't want to count as referral traffic, it applies in GA4 too. The list should include domains that use the measurement ID for the data stream and any third-party tools or tech stack integrations that you use that may loop traffic back to a site, which are unfairly attributed to conversions. By adding domains to the list of unwanted referrals, GA4 will append the ignore referrer parameter with a value true to every event that matches the conditions. This parameter tells analytics that the referrer should not be displayed as the source of traffic. A tip from me on referral exclusions is to look at your acquisition reports, focus on referral as a channel, and add a secondary dimension to show the source. If you're new to all this, don't worry, we'll provide a guided walkthrough in a later session. If you're selling products, list all third-party payment processors like Klarna, Stripe, or PayPal. If you're using any third-party integrations like password recovery tools, list those too. And as self-referral traffic can happen, I recommend also adding your domains to the referral exclusions list. In an earlier lesson, we spoke about some of the new metrics in GA4, one of which is engaged sessions. As a quick reminder, an engaged session in GA4 is a session that lasted longer than the default 10 seconds, had a conversion event, or triggered more than one page view. When we talk about session timeout, the default for both Universal Analytics and GA4 is 30 minutes. But now you can actually change both the default time for engaged sessions and session timeout in your admin settings. Let's look at how you do that. Navigate back to Configure your domain and expand to Show More. Under Unwanted Referral, select Adjust Session Timeout. You'll notice that the max allowed for session timeout is 7 hours and 55 minutes. For an engaged session, the minimum is 10 seconds and the maximum is 60 seconds. Here you have the option to adjust the settings to what's relevant to you or your client. For some context, if you're working on a B2B site that has a lot of content and forms, and you want visitors to be active for around 45 minutes, think filling out job applications, watching webinars, or listening to podcasts. Consider increasing the session timeout to say 1 hour to avoid inflating your sessions. Now imagine I'm on the site. I load the page, start watching a webinar for 45 minutes, and then click on that page again. If you're running the default setting, it would time out my session at 30 minutes and then trigger a new session when I start clicking on the page once the webinar is over. This session being treated as 2 sessions rather than 1 highlights the importance of changing the default settings. Now let's consider the engaged sessions. If you have, for example, advertising on a site, think news sites and blogs, it makes money if visitors stay longer. That means there's a benefit in changing the engaged sessions to say 60 seconds because it better indicates an engaged user for the business model and website objectives. Bear in mind that it's not retroactive, meaning this change won't be applied to your historical data. Consider this before changing anything, as it does impact the way your sessions and engaged sessions are calculated. Okay, that's it for now on referral exclusion and session and engagement timeouts. You should know your way around these settings and have a good understanding of why it's best not to settle for their default mode. Coming up in the next lesson, we'll jump into data retention and reporting identity. See you there. Welcome back. In this lesson, we're looking at data retention settings in GA4. We'll revisit the two main reporting areas and tell you what you need to know about retaining user data to ensure you don't fall foul of your privacy and legal requirements. Let's dive in. Okay, we're back on the admin page under the data collection and modification section. There, select data retention. This will show you the user and event data retention options for your data stream. By default, all new properties have event data retention set to 2 months. This means that after a 2-month period, your raw event level tables are no longer available inside GA4. To understand the impact this setting has on your data, let's look at the difference between our two main reporting areas in GA4. You might remember from our previous lesson, we have standard reports and explore reports. Standard reports, which you're likely more familiar with, provide quick access to top-level metrics and key insights about a website or app. The data in standard reports is aggregated, meaning it's summarized and doesn't contain user-level details. These reports are great for monitoring high-level metrics like users, sessions, page views, and sources of traffic. Your data retention settings don't impact these metrics. You'll see legacy data for as long as you are actively tracking a website with GA4. The Explore section is where you'll create detailed reports with more functionality than standard reports. Here you can create freeform, funnel, path analysis, cohort exploration, and segment overlap. This data is impacted by your data retention settings. The key difference from standard reports is that Explore gives you the flexibility to slice and dice user-level data without being limited by aggregation. If you have the default 2 months as your retention setting, your Explore report will only have a look-back window of a 2-month period. You can change this to say 14 months. If you use GA360, you can apply an even longer look-back window, which is not retroactive. It can take about a day for setting changes to take effect. This is an example of a setting you might want to check with your data protection officer or privacy consultant. Why? Well, it's down to your privacy policy, user consent and compliance with data protection laws. For example, let's say your company has carried out a risk assessment associated with longer data retention. This setting links to Explore, which is powered by your raw user level data. The user level data could be classed as sensitive. Holding onto it for longer increases your company's risk if there's a data breach. Also, a change in data retention from 2 to 14 months could mean your company's privacy policy needs to be changed and your consent management platform updated to ensure you have user consent to store data for longer. I know it might seem like you don't have to worry about this, but do so at your peril. It can lead to legal complications, fines, and a loss of user trust. My advice is to lean into any data protection expertise you can to balance what you need with privacy and legal requirements. Okay, that wraps up our lesson showing you around your data retention settings in GA4. Next up, we'll switch things up and look at configuration settings so you get to see the data you need to build powerful reports. Hi again. In this lesson, we're still on the subject of data collection and configuration, guiding you through the settings area in GA4. Earlier in the module, we covered the concept of custom parameters. Now I want to show you visually what that looks like and how to change your configuration settings to build the reports you need. Let me walk you through an example. Here we have a GA4 data stream We're in the standard report section looking at the real-time reports. Here we can see the events, including the click event, which shows all outbound link clicks. By selecting click event, we can see all the parameters nested under that event. If we wanted to click on the link URL, we'd see the outbound URLs that a website visitor selected. As real-time only provides the last 30 minutes of data, if we're to venture into my standard reports to look for that link URL parameter for the click event, it won't be there. If we select the click event, we only see the event counts, which isn't helpful for building reports with your standard aggregate data. As the auto, enhanced and recommended parameters are available by default in Explore, we can create a report like this, which allows us to look at the click event and the link URL and see what people are clicking on. This is from the Google demo account, but this is only for 2 or 14 months and can be heavily sampled. So we need to register them as a custom definition. We do this by going to the admin configuration section and selecting the option for custom definitions in the data display. Then click on the custom dimension button. This opens up a box on the right-hand side. Here we'll fill in the information we need. It might seem a little confusing to see the words custom definitions and custom dimensions. My hack is to replace these words in this section with publish parameter, because that's exactly what this setting does. It lets us see the data in our reports. Now, type in the name you want your dimension to appear as in the reports and keep the scope as event scoped. Here I've used link URL as my dimension name. I like to add a description so people can see why it's published. In this case, I've made a note to say we want to see the link URL in the standard reports. The final step is to type in or use the drop-down to find the parameter. For example, we need the link URL parameter. Then you just click Save. Once we're done, you'll see our custom definition, otherwise known as published parameter. Now that we've covered parameters and how to register them, it's worth considering the common parameters you want to publish. You should do this as soon as you can, because this setting is not retroactive. If you publish the parameter today, you'll only start to see the data from today. As you can see from this example, we have a number of parameters that have been published. This means we can dig deeper into the event data in our standard reports. For example, the file name parameter will show us what file was downloaded, and special custom parameters for the Wix forms. Finally, a gentle reminder that custom parameters have to be registered. Otherwise, you'll only see the event name in your reports. So now we've covered custom parameters in GA4, in our next lesson, we'll move on to Google Search Console and where to find its data in the GA4 library. Also, a reminder at this stage to make use of the resources and templates we've provided for a deeper dive into the various GA4 capabilities. Google loves Google products, and you can be sure it never misses a trick to get us using more. This is certainly evident in GA4. In this lesson, we'll explore GA4's product link section and how to connect GA4 with Google Search Console. Let's take a look. To view Google Search Console data in GA4, you need to connect both platforms. To do this, firstly, we have to navigate to Admin by clicking on the cog in the bottom left. There, look for Product Links and select Search Console Links. To link your GA4 data stream with your Search Console, you need to have both the editor role in GA4 and be a verified owner of the Search Console property. Once you have both of these, it's straightforward. Simply choose the Search Console account and select your data stream. When you've confirmed these steps, you can submit your configuration settings. When Search Console has been linked with your GA4 data stream, the Google Search Console report will show up in your library as an unpublished report card. This needs to be published to see the data in your UI. Click on the library icon at the bottom left of your standard lifecycle reports. This will open your library collections. There will be a box to show Search Console where its status will appear in grey text as unpublished. Select the 3 dots next to the title and click Publish. Once you've published your Search Console, your library card will show a green tick. Bear in mind that Search Console data is available in GA4 48 hours after it's collected, and you'll only see a maximum of 16 months. After that period, data is no longer kept. The integration makes 2 reports available in your GA4 property. The Google Organic Search Queries report, which displays search queries and associated Search Console metrics for the linked Search Console property. You can drill deeper into the data by Search Console dimensions, but not by analytics dimensions. The data in these reports can also be found in Search Console. The second report is the Google Organic Search Traffic report, which displays landing pages with associated Search Console and analytics metrics. You can drill into the data by the country and device dimensions. Now, even though we have an SEO lens on our data collection, I'd like to mention that if you are using Google Ads, then you need to link your Google Ads account to your GA4 property. This allows you to import and bid on GA4 conversions in Google Ads and share any audiences. These integrations with Google Ads and Google Search Console conclude our lessons on how to optimize data collection and configuration in GA4. In our next lesson, we'll move on to the topic of selecting and implementing events. I look forward to seeing you there. Welcome back. By now, you're probably thinking, what events do I need for my GA4 data stream? How should I use them in my reports? And what conversions do I require? Well, these are the questions we'll be answering in the next few lessons as we turn our attention to events and conversions in GA4. In this lesson, we'll provide an overview of event strategy and dive a little deeper after that. If you're ready, let's get started. To figure out which events you need for your GA4 data stream, you need to think strategically about your or your client's website's objectives. Let's illustrate this with an example, one that covers 2 key measurement needs for most sites. 1, the need to track e-commerce, and 2, the need to track form submissions. Okay. Imagine you run tennissmacket.com, an online shop that sells tennis gear. You have 3 main business objectives. Number 1, sell tennis equipment and accessories. Number 2, build your newsletter database. Number 3, create content to support brand and repeat sales. So we need to make sure that you're collecting events that can track those business objectives. I call this process event mapping. This involves walking through the customer journey from the home page to the product and content pages and making a note of all the key interactions and considering how those interactions can support your measurement objectives. From doing this, you can then work out which events fire for those interactions and if the event will come from the auto enhanced out of the box or recommended and custom event, which needs either a product integration or an event built in Google Tag Manager. Now let's walk through our tennis company, which uses Wix. Okay, we'll start on the homepage. Imagine they have a newsletter sign-up form, a YouTube product video, and some links to review sites about how awesome they are. The enhanced events will likely track the embedded YouTube videos, so we'll validate that the video start, video progress, and video complete are working. For the form, we'll use the recommended event generate lead to track our client database growth and the Wix product integrations to capture that data. Lastly, the clicks to the review sites are outbound link clicks, so the enhanced event click will track this for us. Next, let's look at the content pages. Imagine there are lots of blog posts and articles and forms to subscribe to a newsletter. The product pages have tons of useful information and a button to buy the product. The automatically collected events will give us events on the page location so we can report on our website content. The enhanced event page view alongside the engagement metrics will help us understand how well our content is performing. For the forms to sign up for the newsletter, we'll need a recommended event generate lead. Again, we're using a Wix integration, so this is already done for us. If we weren't, we'd need to do this in Google Tag Manager. The enhanced event file download can give us data on the content that was downloaded. For users who buy products via the e-commerce store, we'll use the recommended e-commerce events such as add to cart, add payment info, and purchase. And yes, you've guessed it, there are Wix integrations that will automatically do this for you. We'll still need to publish the parameters for file name and link URL so we can dig into the data in our standard reports. We'll also need to register the custom parameters for them to show up, and we covered this in a previous lesson. So this is event mapping in action. For me, it's really helpful to put all the events in a single document to make it easier to find the event names and parameters for a given site. Think of it as a cheat sheet. We'll provide a sample one for you in a later lesson. Now let's consider conversions. Out of all the data you collect, you'll also need a conversion event. This is the most important event that will tell you how well you're doing in meeting your business objectives. The smart way to approach conversions is to think about the business from a macro and micro point of view. Macro conversions are the main key performance indicators for the business. In other words, if this conversion event isn't achieved, the business will go bust. Our macro conversions for our tennis company would be the purchase events, showing new customers and any upgrades from their campaigns targeting cross and upsells. Micro conversions are smaller user interactions that show your customers moving towards your bigger objectives. Don't be deceived by their size, there's a lot of value in them. Again, going back to our tennis company, a micro conversion would be the content downloaded, videos played, and the newsletter sign up. When we map out all the micro goals leading to the major macro conversions, we get an outline that looks something like this. In the left column, we have business goals, and in the right column, we have the session conversion rate. 5% of people played company video, 3% downloaded content, 2.5% signed up to the newsletter, and 1.5% purchased products. My tip, in addition to looking at your overall conversion rates for a website, is to review your conversion rates by channel. This can be a real eye-opener and help you understand the role of your individual marketing channels. For example, your organic traffic could have a session conversion rate of 9% for signing up to the newsletter, but a 0.5% conversion rate in buying the product. This could indicate that the role of organic is at the top of the funnel. Your email campaigns could have a session conversion rate of 0.6% for playing video content on your site, but a 12% conversion rate for buying a product. This tells you that email is at the end of the funnel, nurturing the user. I know this is hypothetical, but I see examples like this all the time. And unfortunately, if you only look at the macro conversions, you can kill off channels and campaigns that feed your funnel. Okay, that concludes our lesson on event strategy in GA4. Hopefully our tennis company has helped you better understand how to use event mapping and conversions to achieve your or your client's business goals. In our next lesson, we'll look at how to create new events based on existing events in GA4. Don't miss it. Hi and welcome back. In this lesson, I'll take you through a step-by-step demo of creating new events from existing ones in the GA4 user interface. Let's get started. In GA4, you can create an event from another event. Now, this might raise a confused eyebrow or two, but if we go back to our event DNA family analogy, it starts making sense. Picture it like a parent passing down their attributes to their child. Remember our parent categories? Auto, enhanced, recommended, and custom. Now think of creating an event from an event as creating a child using DNA from the parent. This new event inherits the genetic makeup of its parent event, just like a child inheriting traits from their parent. Why do we bother with this? Well, creating events from existing ones speeds up the setup, maintains consistency, and enhances data analysis. Also, looking at event count alone won't give you the insights you're looking for. You'll need to isolate a parameter for an event to get what you need. Let me show you an example. We have the enhanced event, click, and the link URL, which will show you the outbound link clicks. This will include links to mail to email addresses on site pages, phone numbers that users can select, and links to other sites like review sites or social media. Now, let's say in your event mapping process, you identified that you need to measure how many people click on the site's email address, which you class as a conversion. Reporting on overall clicks is fine, but what if you need a focused KPI, like how many users clicked on mail to links? This is when you can create a child event to drill down into the specific scenario. Another example is a sign-up event. Let's go back to our tennis company example. It has two forms, one for newsletter sign-ups and one for a product waitlist. Again, you can report on the overall sign-up events, but this wouldn't be totally accurate as it includes all the parameters nested under that event. To have a focused KPI for sign-ups or product waitlists, we could create a child event where we isolate the form ID parameter for users who triggered the two types of forms. Let's take a look at how you would do this in GA4. The hard part of creating an event from an event is actually mapping out what you need. Creating them in GA4 is actually straightforward. A reminder that if you don't see what's on the screen, check your access level as you might need to be bumped up one. Okay, so go to your admin console by clicking on the settings cog in the bottom left. Then go to events, which is under the data display group. Next, we need to click create event. This will open a box and from there you click create. Since we've thought about our event mapping and worked out what child events we need, we just have to add our requirements into this box. Give your child a name, all lowercase with an underscore to separate, and then type in the conditions. Using our click event example, I'll call my new event mail to _ clicks, which I'll put in the custom event name box. For the conditions, I want to isolate the click event, so I add click undervalue. And since I want to isolate a parameter, I hit add condition. I'll type link URL for the parameter, and I know what the value is, mail to, so I'd add that under value. We then get to select from a number of operators. Because I want to track any link URL that has a value of mail to, I'll select starts with from the operator dropdown. And once you're happy with your creation, click create. And from now on, if these conditions are met, this new event called mail_to_clicks will show up in reports. You can then repeat the process for any other child events you need to create. For example, if I wanted to isolate a particular email on site pages, like a support email, I'd name this new event support_mail_to and change the conditions to say that the link URL equals and then be specific about the value. It'd look something like this. So that was a quick run through of how to create a new event based on an existing one. Next up, we'll look at the importance of conversions and how to create them in GA4. Hi there. Glad you could join this lesson where we're looking at conversions. In the next few minutes, we'll explore the importance of conversions in GA4 and provide a step-by-step guide to creating them in the UI. Let's dive in. Conversions are key to understanding the success of your or your client's online presence. They represent a measurable purpose or outcome and act as clear indicators of how well a website is performing. Think of a conversion as a specific, trackable action that aligns with your business objectives, such as a completed purchase, a newsletter sign-up, or content download. Let's take an example. Imagine you have a website selling products with a purchase conversion rate of 2%. That ratio tells you more than a statistic telling you you had 10 sales. Why? Because the conversion rate puts your sales in context with the traffic your site receives. It tells you not just how many sales there were, but how effective your site is at converting visitors into buyers. Let's talk about how conversions worked for Universal Analytics. Some of you will recall that you had 4 different types of conversions, or goals as they were called in UA. They were an event goal, when someone takes an action, such as watching a video. A destination, when someone gets to a specific page, such as a thank you page. And the last 2, duration and number of page views. Now, we don't have that format in GA4 because everything in GA4 is an event. That means your conversions are event names only. You just need to know which events to mark as a conversion. This could be a parent event, such as a purchase, or a child event, like mail_to_clicks. There are 2 ways to mark an event as a conversion, which may require you to review your admin settings. Let me walk you through the process. Let's look at option 1, which we'll call Type Your Conversions. Go to your admin settings and select Conversions. This will give you a list of any current conversion events in your data stream. Select New Conversion Event. A box will open. Here, type in the name of your conversion event, which must match exactly. When you're satisfied they match, click Save. That event will now be available in your reports. Okay, let's look at the second option, which we'll call Toggle Your Conversions. For this, return to the events data display where we created a new event. This will show you a list of all existing events in your GA4 data stream. Then find the event and turn the toggle on. In this example, I've navigated to the file download. As you can see, the toggle is off. By turning the toggle on, this file download event is now marked as a conversion event. Is there a difference between toggling a conversion or typing it in? Not really. Both methods achieve the same outcome. The choice comes down to personal preference. Personally, I prefer to toggle the event on directly in GA4. This eliminates the risk of typos or entering an incorrect event name, which can happen if typing it manually. So you see, marking an event as a conversion is a straightforward process. You just need to spend some time mapping your events and identifying which ones are important for your objectives. Okay, that concludes this lesson, but we're not done with conversions yet. Next up, we'll explore the two different conversion rates in GA4. See you there. In recent lessons, we've worked out our events from our event mapping exercise, identified some new child events and created them. We've also marked some events as conversions. We've done all this because understanding how well a site performs and what marketing is driving traffic to that site is key. Part of that understanding involves looking at conversion rates. Now, there are two different types of conversion rates in GA4 you need to know. Let's quickly unpack them for you in this lesson. The first conversion rate in GA4 is session conversion rate. This is the method we're familiar with from previous Google Analytics tools, and it's all about how many sessions led to conversions. So how is session conversion rate calculated? Simply divide the number of sessions where a conversion happened by the total number of sessions. Imagine you had 100 visitors, of which 10 made a purchase. That's a 10% session conversion rate because 10 out of 100 sessions led to a sale. The second conversion rate you need to know about is user conversion rate. This one is a bit different. Here we take the number of users who converted at least once and compare it to all the users who visited your site. So let's say a user visits your site and makes a purchase. That's great, they've converted, but here's the twist. If they keep visiting your site after that, the user conversion rate doesn't change. Why? Because they've already been counted as a converter. To calculate this rate, GA4 divides the number of users who have triggered any conversion by the total number of users. The difference in these two conversion rates is important to remember because you'll have the option to select a session or user conversion rate in your standard and explore reports. We'll be covering this in our final lesson. Okay, that's it on all things conversions. In our next lesson, we'll move to standard and explore reporting. Hope you'll join me there. Welcome back. In this lesson, we'll look at the GA4 report, focusing on standard and explore reporting areas and the pros and cons of each. While you'll come across 4 reporting sources, standard, explore, the GA4 API and BigQuery, let's dive into standard and explore in more detail. First, I want to touch on some key concepts for understanding why your data behaves the way it does. Sampling, thresholding, and cardinality. Let's start with sampling. You'll see this creep into your reports, and if you're not careful, you may make decisions without the full picture. GA has always had a sampling algorithm. Depending on the question you're asking within your dataset, GA may not look at all your data, but take a data sample to build reports instead. I'll show you a little later when we go through the UI, but generally, you'll see an icon that flags if sampling has been applied. Thresholding is a GA4 feature to protect site visitor privacy. It restricts certain data from being displayed in your reports to prevent the identification of users based on demographics, interests, or other data signals. Again, there'll be an icon in your reports if thresholding has been applied. Lastly, we have cardinality. If you see data values that show other in brackets, it's likely that cardinality has been added to the report. Cardinality refers to data that has a high number of values that can be assigned to it. For example, a low cardinality dimension would be device, as the values are low, just mobile, tablet, and desktop. A high cardinality dimension would be something like page location, because you can have more possible unique values. As you know, some websites have a few pages and others can have hundreds of thousands of unique pages. Now let's look at the pros and cons of the Standard and Explore reports. First up, Standard. You'll likely be most familiar with these, as it's where you'll see the life cycle, acquisition, engagement, and monetization reports. These tell you how people found a site, what they did on the site, and what products were purchased. Standard report data is aggregated, meaning it's summarized and doesn't contain user-level data. They're not impacted by your data retention settings, so you'll see data for as long as you're collecting data. But they're subject to sampling, thresholds, and cardinality limits, which we talked about earlier. Whether you're looking for page views during a campaign, how SEO impacted form submissions, or monthly video views, Standard reports are great for aggregated top-line metrics. It's easy to export and share the reports too. The downside is the aggregated data, which can make it inflexible compared to user-level analysis. Next, let's check out Explore reports. They look and feel like Looker and let you dig deeper with raw user-level data. With Explore, you can slice and dice data without being limited by aggregation. You can use advanced techniques like funnels, path analysis, and data visualization to understand your data. On the downside, you're limited by your data retention settings. And if using the free version, you have 2 or 14 months to select. Again, like Standard, they're subject to sampling, thresholds, and cardinality limits. So that's an introduction to the Standard and Explore reports. In the next lesson, we'll look at navigating the GA4 Standard reporting interface, building reports, and sharing them too. Hi there. Now that we've covered the advantages and disadvantages of Standard reports, let's see how to build, edit, and share them. To access the Standard reports, click this icon under the Home button. You'll see lifecycle reports in alphabetical order on the left, and each has reports nested underneath. Above Lifecycle, you'll see real-time reports, which can be useful when you've just launched a website or campaign and want to see the immediate impact. For example, if engagement is lower than expected, you can quickly adjust strategies or investigate potential technical issues. Or, during high traffic events like a product launch or sale, you can monitor performance and, if you get lucky and sell out, tweak paid marketing campaigns. Real-time reports show activity for the last 30 minutes, and decisions based on this data should be considered initial, reactive measures that may need to be refined as more data comes in. My last point on real-time is that it currently only shows traffic by first user default channel grouping, meaning you'll only see the first touch point for new users. Users and session data isn't available, as we don't have a card here for the session default channel grouping. Okay, back to the lifecycle reports. When you select a report, you'll see the Overview tab, which is a summary of your acquisition data. Below, you'll see User Acquisition Report, which could be called New User Acquisition Report because it only shows metrics for new users. Also, notice how the report indicates that it's using the first user default channel grouping. This report is powered by the first visit event, and it'll only record the first touch point in a user's first session. For any conversions you've set in your data stream, the scope is first touch user scope, and the look back window is typically set to the maximum default setting of 30 days. So this report is great if you want to know users' first touch points, and if they converted within the last 30 days, then the first touch point gets the credit. In simple terms, this report tells you where new users are coming from and what marketing activity has led them to the site. Moving on to the traffic acquisition report, which takes a different approach of using first touch attribution session scope and shows the first source of each individual session. Remember, sessions will contain all the interactions a user has, which begins with the first event a user triggers and continues until they've left the site or there's a period of inactivity. For any conversions, the look back window is set to 90 days. Non-direct still applies, meaning if a user had a session that started as a direct session and they converted, GA will look for a previous session to attribute that conversion. Let me walk through an example. I come to a tennis store having clicked on a search result looking for a tennis racket. I do this at 9 a.m. and read some reviews, watch a video and add it to my cart. I leave my tab open and come back at midday and purchase. So my session at 9 a.m. would be grouped under the session source medium of Google Organic. My lunchtime purchase, where I've just gone back to my tab, has no channels to attribute. So that would have the session source of not set, which puts it in the direct bucket. Thanks to the non-direct rule, direct would not get the credit because GA has the previous session to tie my purchase to, so organic would get the credit for that purchase. The events report under engagement will show you all the events associated with your data stream. You can see the event count here and how many users have triggered them. Any conversions associated with your data stream that have been triggered by a user will be listed here. A key difference between the conversions in your user report and traffic acquisition report is scope. This report is using event level attribution, meaning it'll only show data for users who have converted. These reports are impacted by your admin settings where you can change your attribution model. For most data streams, the default is data-driven attribution and the look-back window is 90 days. Your pages and screens report will show which pages are getting the most views. This is similar to the all pages report in Universal Analytics, but we now have users in this report. You now know more than just a total page view. You can see how many users looked at the content. The landing page report will show the URI associated with the first page view in a session. You might see not set for the landing page dimension when a session doesn't have a page view associated with it. If you've set up the recommended e-commerce events, they'll populate the e-commerce reports within the monetization section, where you can see which items have been viewed, added to cart, and purchased. As I said earlier, if you've linked Google Search Console to your GA4 property and published the report in your library, you'll get access to the Queries and Google Organic Search Traffic report. The User Attributes report tells you where in the world your users are coming from. It'll show users' language, location, age, and gender. You might see thresholding applied in this report as it has aggregated data from users who've consented to share their demographic data. The last one to mention is the tech details report, which shows browsers, screen resolutions, and operating systems, to name a few. It can be helpful to look at the conversions and revenue by the dimensions. For example, it could show a site that doesn't perform well on a particular resolution, and you could optimize to make the experience better and improve conversions. Let's move on to how you can go beyond the pre-built reports, starting with the date range in the top right corner of reports. I think the interface is much easier than the previous version in UA. A neat feature is the little toggle compare, which lets you compare time periods. For example, you could compare December with November, or December 2023 with December 2022. You'll see the data has the percentage change. And when you compare the data, you can also match the day of the week, which is helpful for anyone with a business cycle. Your reports by default will show the top 10 rows of data. If you want to see more, click on rows per page and select the number of rows you want to see. I'll give you an example of how to use the search bars and add a secondary dimension to reports. We're in the traffic acquisition reports, and we can see there's a dimension set by default, the session default channel grouping. The source and medium belonging to each channel are nested under here. Now, we want to isolate organic search and to know what the source is, like Bing or Google. This is how you do it. In the search bar at the top of the table, we'll type organic search and hit enter. This will only show that channel's data. We now need to click the small blue plus sign beside the dimension title. It'll open a box that looks like this. So we want to find our second dimension to layer into the report. As we're in the traffic acquisition report, and that uses the session default channel grouping, we need to select the session source medium. And there you have it. Your table now has two dimensions, the session default channel grouping, and by using the search bar, we have isolated just the organic search channel, and the session source medium shows where SEO work is paying off. Do you get more organic traffic from Bing or Google? Should there be more traffic from Bing or Google? You won't know if you just look at organic search. You need to look at the source, meaning does the link come from Bing or Google? Another scenario is when adding a filter to reports. The Google demo account is using cross-domain tracking. What's cross-domain tracking? Great question. Cross-domain tracking is a crucial concept, especially for businesses with multiple domains or subdomains. It lets you track user interactions across different websites as a single continuous session. For example, a customer might start their journey on the main site, googlemerchandisestore.com, and then move to the shop subdomain to make a purchase. Cross-domain tracking ensures that this entire process is seen as one continuous interaction and collects data on both domains as if it were one website. I want to only see the traffic acquisition report for the subdomain shop.googlemerchandisestore.com. Why? Another great question. Sometimes you may have a situation where you want to analyze the traffic for a specific part of your website, like focusing exclusively on the performance of the shop subdomain. Using a filter, I can understand how many users and sessions happened on the shop subdomain and how my marketing campaigns are driving traffic to landing pages. In the top left corner, there's a little box called Add Filter. Click this to open a box on the right where we'll build our filter conditions. You can either type the dimension you want or scroll down to find it. As I want to filter a subdomain, I'll pick hostname, which will then trigger match type to open. I'll pick exactly matches as I want to specifically look at the subdomain. Once I've picked my match type, it'll provide a list of values. In this case, I'll choose the shop subdomain. When you're happy with the conditions, click Apply, which for now is hidden in the bottom right. The report now has the filter applied, and you'll see the filter icon in the top left. If you hover over it, you can see what the conditions are. Just click on the X when you want to get rid of the filter. As well as searching reports, adding secondary dimensions and filters, you can also use the comparison feature, which follows the same structure as filters. Select Add Comparison in the top left to open a comparison box where you'll set your conditions. I'll walk you through another example. I want to compare my organic search traffic to the rest of our channels. You can use the box to type your dimensions or scroll to find it. We want to select Session Default Channel Grouping as we're in the Traffic Acquisition report, which uses that as its scope. When we have our dimension set, we need to select the match type. For this example, I'll select Exactly Matches, which will trigger the values associated with the conditions. Then tick Organic Search. Click Apply. When you use a comparison, it'll change the color so you can identify the data. I could repeat the action and create a second comparison and add conditions to show how organic and paid search compare to channels. You'll be able to see how many comparisons you have on the report by looking at the top left and on the right. See how the second comparison has a different color? A nice update to GA4 is the toggle button when you navigate to a different report. Here I've moved from the traffic acquisition report to the pages and screen report, and the comparisons are showing at the top left with the toggle turned off. If you turn that toggle on, you'll see the page view data for those two channels. As I record this, it only works for comparisons. If you tried to do this for filters and didn't see anything, you're out of luck, as they currently don't get passed to other reports. Something unique to GA4 is the ability to edit and customize reports. I'll walk you through an example, and then you can think about ideas for your own reporting needs. In our traffic acquisition report, we have the conversion count, which is great, but no conversion rate. Click the pencil at the top right. Like comparisons and filters, there's a box with options. I want to add a session conversion rate, so I'll select metrics. I want to use the session conversion rate because of the report we're in. We're looking at the traffic acquisition report, which, as I said, uses the session default channel grouping and shows data for the first source in a user's session. So my session focused report needs a session conversion rate. From here, I can click Add Metric and either type what I want or use the drop down. I'll find my session conversion rate. This will add it to the bottom of the list, meaning it'll be at the end of the report. I prefer using the drag and drop to move the session conversion rate metric so it sits next to the conversion total. When I'm happy with the position of my metrics, I'll hit Apply. The report will then include the new metric. It's much more helpful to see the conversion rate next to the conversion number. Finally, we just need to click Save in the top right. Select Save changes to the current report, which will open another box to confirm you want to save it to the traffic acquisition report. You repeat this in the user acquisition reports, but this time you need to change the conversion rate to user conversion rate as it's looking at new users. This will change it for everyone who has access to the account. Lastly, we'll talk about sharing reports. There are two options depending on your access level. If you click on the share icon top left, you'll see share link or download file. The share link option generates a URL to share with someone who will also need access to the report. If you select download, you can choose PDF or a CSV file. And that's it for our tour of standard reports. I hope you got to know the interface and feel comfortable editing and customizing reports. Next up, we'll dive into the Explore section. See you in the next lesson. Welcome back. Now that we've looked at the standard reporting interface, let's dive into another option called Explore. The Explore area of GA4 lets you create reports based on raw user level data. This means you could drill down into individual user interactions and get insights that might not be available from the standard reports aggregated data. Aggregated data summarizes user interactions, presenting a high-level view of trends and patterns across all users. And while this is incredibly useful for understanding overall site performance and general trends, it lacks the depth and detail that raw user-level data offers. Remember, in Explore, you have a data retention limit, which will either be 2 or 14 months for the free version of GA4, whereas there aren't any limits in Standard. There are a number of techniques that you can use, and we'll look at the freeform and funnel exploration today. Let's start with the freeform reports. Go ahead and click on the freeform option. Each report has 3 main parts. First is the variables, where you can choose your date range, segments, dimensions, and metrics. Secondly, under settings, you'll see the variables you've applied to the report. You can also change the way your data is visualized and add filters. Finally, the output is the report, and it's generated based on your tab settings. Let's walk through an example of how you can use the freeform reports. These come with default settings, which can be removed by clicking on the device category and city dimensions. Let's say you want to create a report that focuses on your website's content. You may want to answer questions like, which blog posts are most popular among my visitors? What kind of content is resonating with them? Which website pages are attracting the most traffic? Are they spending a significant amount of time reading certain articles? Understanding this can help you make informed decisions about content strategy, like what topics to focus on or what type of content to produce more of. Instead of looking at all the website data for all page views, I can create a report with a filter to only see a particular section of the website. I'm using the Google Analytics demo account to show this method. Go to Dimensions under Variables and click the plus icon. Here you'll see all the dimensions available for this report format. You can either type in the dimension or search for it. We want to use the page location dimension. So after selecting that, click Import, which will bring it into the Variables tab. I like to use page location because it shows the full URL, which is partly preference, but also when it comes to cross-domain tracking, it helps me know which part of the site my user is on, which is not entirely obvious when you can only see the URI. To move the page location to the Setting tab, you can either drag and drop it or double-click on it. By default, there will be 10 rows of data, but you can change that by clicking on the drop-down. The maximum number of rows for freeform reports is 500. Now, we want to add a filter to only see data for a particular website section, so we'll click on the Filters option at the bottom. For this example, we'll choose Page Location. Then you'll need to define the conditions. I'll select Contains and the value Google Redesign. Your report will now only show the full URL of pages that contain Google redesign. To help spot trends and display data that reduces cognitive load, you can try different visualization techniques. If you click on the three bubbles, you will get something that looks like this. Now, imagine using this to see what blogs or case studies are trending. You can also layer segments to just see traffic from a device or channel. The good thing about these reports is that you can't break anything, so I encourage you to play around with them. Another example is creating a report of 404 pages. By identifying these pages, we can monitor any potential issues. For instance, you might discover broken links, outdated URLs referenced in marketing campaigns, or common URL misspellings entered by users. Firstly, find the page title dimension in your Variables tab. And using the filter, create a rule to show page titles that contain the 404 copy. In the Google Merchandise Store, that page title will contain page unavailable. Adding the page location allows you to see the exact URLs leading to these errors. A gentle reminder to keep an eye out for the green tick, which is in the top right corner. This lets you know if sampling has been applied to the report. Sampling in GA occurs when the platform uses a subset of your data instead of analysing the entire dataset. You should always be mindful of whether your GA4 report is based on sample data because it affects the precision and reliability of your insights. Let's consider an example to illustrate this. Imagine you're looking at a report based on only 8% of your total data, as opposed to one that uses 100% of the data. In the case of the 8% sample data, if the website had 100,000 visits, the report is only analysing 8,000 of those visits. Now think about the implications of this. While a report based on 8,000 visits can provide a general sense of user behaviour and site performance, it might miss out on crucial details. But if the report uses 100% of data, you're getting a complete view. My last example for you in this lesson is the funnel exploration reports. Here you'll get a pre-built funnel that will edit to our events and requirements. This is a quick walkthrough to give you an idea of what we can do with our funnels. First, we need to edit a few things. I'll start by removing the device breakdown to make the report cleaner and more focused. It can also reduce the chance of sampling being applied to the report, and because these reports are flexible, you can always add it back later. Next, we want to change the steps because the template we're using comes with predefined steps that are quite generic and might not match the unique events or interactions we want to track. Click the pen icon next to Steps in the Settings tab. You have so much flexibility here. You can change each step's name and then define what needs to be triggered. This could be just an event or a parameter from an event. The success of this will depend on what events you have within your data stream. Because everything is an event, your funnels aren't just for e-commerce, it can be used for B2B sites as well. This example is for a software company. They'd invested in a quiz on their site to help users pick the right product for them. We tracked these events and were able to map the funnel steps from users starting, finishing, viewing the results, and buying. What is super cool in this report is the small toggle Show Elapsed Time. This updates the report to show you how long it took users to move between the steps. I encourage you to play around with the Explore area as there are insights here that can really help you with marketing strategies. Okay, that's a wrap on the Explore area of GA4. I'll see you again for the final lesson where we'll recap everything we've learnt about GA4. See you there. Well done on making it to the end of the Google Analytics 4 module of our SEO course. We've covered quite a bit throughout our lesson, so let's quickly recap what we've learned. We started this module by exploring the evolution of GA4 and what makes it different from the tools that came before it. Then we looked at what you need to know when it comes to tracking site visitors and consent rules. You learned what a session is and about the key metrics used in GA4. We covered the 4 key event categories and how they're structured. Then we got into the topic of admin configuration settings and the importance of assuming yours are incorrect from the get-go. We discovered the key role referral exclusions play in your marketing channels getting the credit they deserve for conversions and revenue. You got the lowdown on what to do when retaining user data so you don't fall foul of privacy laws. Then we walked you through how to register custom parameters in GA4. We moved to integrations and looked at the steps to connect GA4 with Google Search Console. You learned the importance of event strategy and got to know the concept of event mapping through a use case. We took you through a step-by-step demo of creating new events from existing ones in the GA4 user interface. Then we explored the importance of conversions in GA4 and how to create them in the UI. We also looked at the 2 types of conversions and how they differ. Lastly, you got an overview of standard and explore reporting and learned how to navigate their interfaces. Google Analytics 4 is no small subject matter, and while there's a lot to take in, if you break it down into the areas we covered, you'll have plenty to get started. And remember, so much of the learning happens while you do it, so don't be afraid to just jump in. Also, make sure to get the most out of this course by exploring the resources we provided and keep an eye on the guides, articles, tutorials and more published on the Wix SEO Hub. That's it. Thanks for watching and best of luck with your GA4 journey.